This great theatre on the banks of the River Avon at Stratford in Warwickshire in England was built in the mid-20th century and is a vibrant, functioning monument to William Shakespeare, generally accepted as the greatest English poet that ever lived. He was born here in Stratford-upon-Avon, made his fame and some fortune in London, but spent his last years back here in Stratford. He had a life of only 52 years. His influence has been colossal, and he has been dead for almost 400 years. Nothing is very far from anything else, and there are always the snug old pubs in which to take refreshment on the way. Walking around Stratford is like being in a Shakespearean theme park, but the difference is that it's real. William Shakespeare. This is his statue in Leicester Square in London, being desecrated by the less than reverent birds. He came here to London as a young man and began his career as an actor and playwright and theatre manager. This is a recreation of Shakespeare's Globe Theatre that stood on this very same site on the south bank of the Thames. Here it was that Shakespeare and his company produced the great plays, all 37 of them. Some of the greatest lines uttered in the history of English drama were first declaimed here. Now is the winter of our discontent. Friends, Romans, countrymen, lend me your ears. I come to bury Caesar, not to praise him. Signor Antonio, many a time and oft in the Rialto you have rated me about my moneys and my usances. Still have I borne it with a gentle shrug, for sufferance is the badge of all our tribe. Every day throughout the world there are hundreds of performances of all his plays, translated into virtually every major language on the planet. In his plays, Shakespeare created a crowded universe of exotic settings full of convincing, colourful characters, and many well-known phrases or sayings are derived from them. We do not watch a play by Shakespeare, it draws us in and envelops us. From Julius Caesar came this portrait of Brutus. This was the noblest Roman of them all. All the conspirators, save only he, did that they did in envy of great Caesar. He only, in a general honest thought and common good to all, made one of them. His life was gentle, and the elements so mixed in him that nature might stand up and say to all the world, "This was a man." From the play King Richard II comes this somewhat jingoistic description of medieval England. This royal throne of kings, this sceptred isle, this earth of majesty, this seat of Mars, this other Eden, demi-paradise, this fortress built by nature for herself against infection and the hand of war, this happy breed of men, this little world, this precious stone set in the silver sea, which serves it in the office of a wall or as a moat defensive to a house against the envy of less happier lands. This blessed plot, this earth, this realm, this England. But it is here in Stratford-upon-Avon where Shakespeare's genius was formed and nurtured. Here in this house he was born in 1564, the son of John and Mary Shakespeare. His father was moderately well off from his occupation as a glover, and later became the mayor of Stratford. From this house it was that young William crept unwillingly to school at Stratford Grammar School, where he was an indifferent student. It is not known whether he wrote much or anything during this time. Certainly nothing survives. Another fascinating house that one can visit close to Stratford is the childhood farm home of Mary Arden, his mother. Seeing the hawks and owls around the farmhouse brings to mind the passage from Shakespeare's Love's Labour's Lost, and is a beautiful sketch about how winter must have been in those days. When icicles hang by the wall, and Dick the shepherd blows his nail, and Tom bears logs into the hall, and milk comes frozen home in pail, when blood is nipped and ways be foul, then nightly sings the staring owl, to wit to woo a merry note, while greasy Joan doth keel the pot. Not a great deal is known about Shakespeare's life. Oh, the bare facts are known about his birth and death, whom he married, about his children and so on, but the details are not there. Did he ever visit his mother's childhood home here? Was his mother a great influence on him? We shall never know.
Some of the greatest song lyrics in the English language were written by Shakespeare as pure theatrical expedients. They were composed, probably hastily, as fillers while sets were changed or characters got on and off the stage. A favourite song of this sort was sung in the play Love's Labour's Lost, in which there is a wonderful wordplay on the word cuckold. When daisies pied and violets blue, and lady smocks all silver white, and cuckoo buds of yellow hue do paint the meadows with delight, the cuckoo then on every tree mocks married men, for thus sings he, cuckoo, cuckoo, a word of fear, unpleasing to a married ear. When shepherds pipe on oaten straws, and merry larks are ploughmen's clocks, when turtles tread and rooks and daws, and maidens bleach their summer smocks, the cuckoo then on every tree mocks married men, for thus sings he, cuckoo, cuckoo, a word of fear, unpleasing to a married ear.
Perhaps the most famous of all the buildings associated with William Shakespeare is this one, Anne Hathaway's cottage. This was the childhood home of Shakespeare's wife, Anne Hathaway. During his teenage years, Shakespeare must frequently have visited here, because he married her when he was only 18 and she was 8 years older. There is a hint of it being a shotgun wedding too, since their first child was born 6 months later. Shakespeare wrote sonnet number 145 for her. Note the play on her name when he writes, hate away. Those lips that love's own hand did make breathed forth the sound that said, I hate, to me that languished for her sake. But when she saw my woeful state, straight in her heart did mercy come, chiding that tongue that ever sweet was used in giving gentle doom, and taught it thus anew to greet. I hate she altered with an end, that followed it as gentle day doth follow night, who like a fiend from heaven to hell is flown away. I hate from hate away she threw, and saved my life, saying, not you. But always there is the river and beauty, as in this from sonnet number 18. Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? Thou art more lovely and more temperate. Rough winds do shake the darling buds of May, and summer's lease hath all too short a date. This one was written to a young man, but many of the sonnets were written to or about the so-called dark lady of the sonnets, whose identity remains a continually debated mystery to this day. Whoever she was, his relationship with the raven-haired beauty was complicated, as witness sonnet number 138, which is all about deceit. When my love swears that she is made of truth, I do believe her, though I know she lies, that she might think me some untutored youth, unlearned in the world's false subtleties. Thus vainly thinking that she thinks me young, although she knows my days are past the best, simply I credit her false-speaking tongue. On both sides thus is simple truth suppressed. But wherefore says she not she is unjust? And wherefore say not I that I am old? Oh, love's best habit is in seeming trust, and age in love loves not to have years told. Therefore I lie with her, and she with me, and in our faults by lies we flattered be.
And from the play As You Like It comes the famous description of the 7 ages of man. All the world's a stage, and all the men and women merely players. They have their exits and their entrances, and one man in his time plays many parts, his acts being 7 ages. At first the infant, mewling and puking in the nurse's arms. Then the whining schoolboy, with his satchel and shining morning face, creeping like snail unwillingly to school. And then the lover, sighing like furnace, with a woeful ballad made to his mistress' eyebrow. Then a soldier, full of strange oaths and bearded like the pard, jealous in honour, sudden and quick in quarrel, seeking the bubble reputation, even in the cannon's mouth. And then the justice, in fair round belly, with good capon lined, with eyes severe and beard of formal cut, full of wise saws and modern instances. And so he plays his part. The sixth age shifts into the lean and slippered pantaloon, with spectacles on nose and pouch on side, his youthful hose well saved, a world too wide for his shrunk shank, and his big manly voice turning again toward childish trebled pipes and whistles in the sound. Last scene of all, that ends this strange eventful history, is second childishness and mere oblivion, sans teeth, sans eyes, sans taste, sans everything.
This grand Elizabethan house is called Nash House, and it belonged to Thomas Nash, the first husband of Shakespeare's granddaughter. This view of Nash House is taken from the site of New House, the house in which Shakespeare died, which he bought in 1597 with his London earnings. New House was, unfortunately, demolished in the 18th century, but the site of the house and this garden, the Great Garden as it's called, have been successfully and beautifully restored and maintained. The garden is lined with box and yew hedges, has beautiful flower beds and borders, and contains an ancient mulberry tree claimed to be a cutting from one that Shakespeare himself planted. The garden is spacious and tranquil, and one tries to imagine Shakespeare himself pottering around it in the years before he died. This is the very site upon which stood New House, in which Shakespeare died in 1616. Some of the foundations can still be seen, and the great garden lies beyond it. Shakespeare wrote 154 sonnets in all, each sonnet in iambic pentameter poetic form and each with 14 lines. The subjects were love, lust, jealousy, loss, betrayal or joy. Some were in chivalrous mood, others more carnal. Sonnet number 116 was about the constancy of love. Let me not to the marriage of true minds admit impediments. Love is not love which alters when it alteration finds, or bends with the remover to remove. Oh no, it is an ever fixed mark that looks on tempests and is never shaken. It is the star to every wandering bark, whose worth's unknown, although his height be taken. Love's not time's fool, though rosy lips and cheeks within his bending sickle's compass come. Love alters not with his brief hours and weeks, but bears it out even to the edge of doom. If this be error, and upon me proved, I never writ, nor no man ever loved. This beautiful house, called Hall's Croft, belonged to Dr. John Hall, the husband of Shakespeare's daughter Susanna. Dr. Hall was a very successful and wealthy doctor, and the house and its furnishings reflect their affluence. It is likely that Shakespeare was a frequent guest here after his return to Stratford around 1610. When in Stratford, it's also a good idea to carry a pocket Shakespeare reference book, so that one can try to identify the source of the quotations that are written up all over the town. And there are the statues of characters from the plays. They are everywhere. This one is Touchstone, the jester from As You Like It, who said, "The fool doth think he is wise, but the wise man knows himself to be a fool." And then there is Falstaff, the jolly, bibulous Sir John Falstaff, who appears in Henry IV Parts 1 and 2, The Merry Wives of Windsor, and finally dies in Henry V. And here Lady Macbeth. Out, damned spot, out, I say! Here's the smell of the blood still. All the perfumes of Arabia will not sweeten this little hand. And Hamlet. Alas, poor Yorick! I knew him, Horatio, a fellow of infinite jest, of most excellent fancy. Here Prince Hal in Henry IV, trying on his father's crown for size, later to say in Henry V, once more, unto the breach, dear friends. There are dramatic images everywhere in Stratford. This ancient town of Stratford is dominated by its river, the Avon, and it is possible to walk along its banks for miles on either side. The elegant white swans are everywhere. They are very protected birds, as they belong to the Crown. There are severe penalties for interfering with them, so swan pie, formerly a great delicacy in England, is nowhere to be found on the menus of local hostelries.
William Shakespeare is probably the most written about writer in history. The articles, books, research theses, tracts and dissertations constitute a whole body of literature in themselves. Never has a poet-playwright received such critical attention, and yet so little is known about the man himself. We have to read between the lines he wrote to discern something of the man who wrote them. From the Sonnets, Sonnet number 30. When to the sessions of sweet silent thought I summon up remembrance of things past, I sigh the lack of many a thing I sought, and with old woes new wail my dear time's waste. Then can I drown an eye unused to flow for precious friends hid in death's dateless night, and weep afresh love's long since cancelled woe, and moan the expense of many a vanished sight. Then can I grieve at grievances foregone, and heavily from woe to woe tell o'er the sad account of fore bemoaned moan, which I new pay as if not paid before. But if the while I think on thee, dear friend, all losses are restored and sorrows end. And from Sonnet number 71. No longer mourn for me when I am dead, then you shall hear the surly sullen bell give warning to the world that I am fled from this vile world with vilest worms to dwell. Nay, if you read this line, remember not the hand that writ it, for I love you so that I in your sweet thoughts would be forgot, if thinking on me then should make you woe. Oh, if, I say, you look upon this verse, when I perhaps compounded am with clay, do not so much as my poor name rehearse, but let your love even with my life decay, lest the wise world should look into your moan, and mock you with me after I am gone.
William Shakespeare, the greatest poet and dramatist who ever wrote in English, or any other language for that matter, is buried here in the Church of the Holy Trinity, together with his wife Anne. It is not known how he died, but a Mr. Ward, a clergyman and physician, wrote in his diary 50 years after Shakespeare's death that Shakespeare and fellow poets Michael Drayton and Ben Jonson had a merry meeting and, it seems, drank too hard, for Shakespeare died of a fever there contracted. After his death, in his will, he left his second best bed to his wife Anne Hathaway. What happened to his best bed is not recorded. Perhaps the dark lady of the sonnets got it? And from sonnet number 29. When in disgrace with fortune and men's eyes, I all alone beweep my outcast state, and trouble deaf heaven with my bootless cries, and look upon myself and curse my fate, wishing me like to one more rich in hope, featured like him with friends possessed, desiring this man's art and that man's scope, with what I most enjoy, contented least. And from Macbeth, tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow creeps in this petty pace from day to day, to the last syllable of recorded time, and all our yesterdays have lighted fools the way to dusty death. Out, out, brief candle, life's but a walking shadow, a poor player that struts and frets his hour upon the stage and then is heard no more. It is a tale told by an idiot, full of sound and fury, signifying nothing.
The play The Tempest is one of Shakespeare's less dramatic works, but it is full of wisdom and humanity. In this, his last great play, Shakespeare summons up all the goodness and folly of the world and bids farewell to it. Our revels now are ended. These our actors, as I foretold you, were all spirits and are melted into air, into thin air. And, like the baseless fabric of this vision, the cloud-capped towers, the gorgeous palaces, the solemn temples, the great globe itself, yea, all which it inherit, shall dissolve, and, like this insubstantial pageant faded, leave not a rack behind. We are such stuff as dreams are made on, and our little life is rounded with a sleep